And that's pretty much all I wanted to do. I wish I was in a tractor right now. But anyway, and other than I did a quick 5-year adventure with the Navy, and otherwise I've been pretty much wanting to farm. And so in, I don't even remember the year, probably 2006, something like that, Natalie and I started Isabelle Farm. And we've done a few things. We grew organic produce, we had a store, CSA, we've grown all kinds of different things. And now we're pretty much set on corn, small grains, hay, forages, and then we do a lot of custom farming. We do a lot of custom planting, and then we're doing a lot of custom grazing. So that's kind of in a nutshell. And you know, we picked up some more acres. So this year we have about 650 acres because I can't seem to stop. That's a bad habit. But Elizabeth asked me to just come talk a little bit about rotational grazing, and thank you, Elizabeth, by the way. I'm not going to talk too much about rotational grazing because I think we've got some other good people talking about that, and it's actually kind of a small part of our operation. What we do is, I mentioned, we're custom grazers. So I own 0 cows, which is like a super good number of cows to own. But we take care of cows about 10 months of the year usually. So we have anywhere from 40 to at the most about 550, and then we'll go back down. Right now we have 200, and we're hoping a truck will come and we'll be down to like 40 again by the end of the week. It gets to be a little much, and we'd rather than not have calves while they're on my watch, so we'd like to get rid of them before they start dropping calves. But the reason, so I mentioned that we don't do a lot of rotational grazing, and that's, just to clarify, that's kind of because what we're doing with this program is we're trying to graze in cropped acres, and we're trying to fit in shoulder seasons, so we're doing annual planted forage, and we're doing crop residue. So in the summer, we do rotational graze when we're on grass, but we typically have much fewer cows mid-summer. And so, you know, the program that I'll talk a little bit about tonight, we have a few things going, but this particular program we started with Boulder County, and we've done some of this before, but officially kind of in 2023. I was having a conversation with Mike Foster at the county, a lot of you know him, and he was sort of lamenting that, you know, we have all this great work happening on small farms with soil health, but it's hard to get them to scale up to some of their larger crop farms. And he was sort of lamenting that and said, hey, you know, how come we can't make this happen? How come we can't keep more residue on? And I said, kind of flippantly, I said, well, because you don't pay. And, you know, the dairy pays for crop residue. And so that was kind of the end of it. And then a few days later, I thought about it a little bit, and I came back to him and I said, you know, Mike, I think we could creatively come up with a little bit of a solution here. And so I'll just kind of talk through what our thought process was with this program. So, you know, we talked about, initially we were talking about crop residue being corn stalks. That's kind of the most common crop residue that's in the county. And a lot of you know, a lot of the corn stalks are removed in the fall. And, you know, I kind of flippantly said, well, it's because you don't pay. That's a little true. But there's also some real problems with massive amounts of corn crop residue. And I think probably if you guys have been doing cover crops and stuff, you know it's not always, it always sounds good to have a lot of crop residue, but then when you have to actually deal with it, it can be a problem. And with corn, you know, you're dealing with a crop that's maybe been 10 feet tall, looks like a forest, and then you come in, take all the grain out, and the rest of that material is still there. And so you've got a very dense mat of residue to deal with. So that's a real problem. And if you're not able to, you know, if we're trying to limit tillage, that really makes it tough to deal with. So what we said is, you know, what we can do is we can bring cattle into these fields and try to solve this problem that way. And it's a little bit tricky because most of these fields have no fences, no corrals, no water, no nothing. They've got a pivot that's, you know, has no water in it in the fall. And so we came up with a program where we would bring in cattle, bring in fencing, and just sort of come in, mobilize, bring in a lot of cattle, and then take them back out. So we did that last year on 130 acres, and that worked great. So this year, you know, we wanted to scale it up because the county has somewhere around, I don't know, 26,000 acres of irrigated farmland, a lot more other acres. And so we knew, like, to make a significant dent, we have to be able to scale some of these things up. So this year we tried to do 1,000 acres, and we did it on 3 seasons. So we did wheat, corn stalks, and we planted after grains were harvested. We came in and planted and then grazed that. So it was fairly ambitious, and the way we did it was we partnered with tenants. So we wanted to make sure that we were not disrupting the current status quo. We wanted to work within tenant systems. So we couldn't tell them what to plant, when to harvest. We didn't have any control over that. And we partnered with a couple ranches. Pancoast Ranch is our primary partner in that. And that's really important because it's hard to, one of the problems is when you ask farmers to bring in cattle, if you bring in enough cattle for 500 acres of corn stalks, then when the corn stalks are gone, you have a lot of cattle. And they're all not set up for that. So that's why it was really important to sort of come up with a group approach where we could utilize the right numbers, move them in, move them out. But, you know, it required a lot of work. We built about 10 miles of, you know, temporary perimeter fence that then we removed, 10 miles of temporary fence. It requires a ton of water is a major problem. A lot of these farms had water on them. The water taps are gone, and so we have to either haul water or negotiate with neighbors to bring in water. And so, you know, at the end of it though, when we looked at the 1,000 acres, we're still kind of figuring things out because a lot of the cows are still there. But, you know, it ends up being somewhere around the order of 2,000 tons of carbon that's not removed, that would have been removed in those fields had we not grazed them. And by grazing them, you know, it's really important because you can mix them with nitrogen. And so one of the challenges with corn stalks is they're basically straight carbon. And so as, you know, some of the compost stories, if you have just a pile of carbon and you come back in the spring, you still just got a pile of carbon. And especially here, it's so dry. Everybody says how they need moisturizer. Well, that is a problem because when we come back in March, corn stalks look very similar to when they were cut in October. And so by, you know, running a grazing program, we're able to keep all those stalks on the ground, process them with the cows, and you know, create a beneficial situation where we're keeping a tremendous amount of carbon, we're adding nitrogen from the cattle, and we're processing it to where when the farmer comes in spring, he doesn't have a problem dealing with residue. The point of you know, the program is just to try to come up with a collaborative approach to take some of the principles that work and scale them up to fields that otherwise haven't had animals in years. And we're hoping that if we do this over you know, several years, that we'll really start to see an improvement in soil organic matter. And the farmers, to be honest, when we started, they were supportive. I think because they liked me, but secretly they didn't really think it was a great idea. And as we've gone forward, they've started to get enthusiastic. And actually, some of the more curmudgeonly fellows we work with are kind of the most sad when the cows leave.
What are the farmers excited about now that they?
Well, I think they were nervous that they would be left with a mess, that the fences wouldn't really come out, that we wouldn't get out in time, and they'd be waiting to do tillage, and there'd be, you know, 100 cows in the way. And so I think that was their nervousness. Now that they're seeing that the residue is not a problem, they're starting to be pretty enthusiastic. So,
Do they have to supplement their feed?
not much, no. I mean, it's tricky with numbers because we had a really tough fall. We had no rain at all. And so that's part of the reason we partner with several bigger ranches, so that we have the option to bring in the number of cows we think. We supplemental feed just in the snow. And honestly, you probably don't have to most of the time, but a few bales on a snowstorm feels, you know, like a nice thing to do. So I just took a few pictures kind of chronologically. This, sure, yeah. Okay, there, you can read that for yourself. This is what it looks like. We put corn stalks in. This was kind of taken right after we put them in. And you can see it's a pretty significant amount. It's kind of hard to get a good picture, but there's a significant amount of material there. And it's kind of amazing. You'd think it looks pretty dry and sad, and the cows would hate it, but they love it. And they're last in there. And this is what it looks like when we go out. It's sort of hard to see, but this is manure all over the place. And you can see how these stalks are all kind of broken and dirt. And that really helps them break down, getting that kind of outer pieces broken down and mixed with manure. This was grazing on wheat, just on 52 in like 287. And that again was beautiful. And this is really helpful because a lot of these cows live on city of Boulder property, county property that are in South County that don't have good irrigation water. And so to be able to keep the cows out of those fields longer lets us, you know, go, helps a lot with that grass. This is just kind of our temporary chutes. This is part of the challenge is all the farms used to have corrals and working chutes and everything. Now there's nothing. So basically we have to bring them in. This is actually has a little bit of a wood corral on this farm, but most places there's zero infrastructure there. So you have to be able to bring stuff in. And then this is actually where we are rotating because this is on grass. It's not a very good picture, but you can see that line across there. That's where we just moved the cows, and the silly calves are always lost. But you know, after a day or two of grazing, it's kind of hard to see, but there's some tall, stringy stuff. But this is really pretty chewed down. And then that grass over there, you can see the cows just almost up to their backs. And then this is oats. So we planted some oats on a farm that we grazed. We didn't rotate the oats because that's again a one-time crop. So we pretty much just run them in, chew it down, run them out. This is my daughter planting, or not planting, but supposed to be planting, cover crops. So we do a lot of custom planting, but we planted right into wheat stubble. So the goal was as soon as the wheat was off, we would plant in. I think that's a pretty good program, but it was hard this year because it just did not help us at all with the rain. And that's just checking the cover crop. And then, you know, we do, a lot of times we can, we try to just move with horses if we can, so we're not trailering everywhere. Some places we need to get a little bit more further, so we'll take trailers, but anywhere we can. My daughter actually thinks we should do everything on the farm on a horse. So, and this is just a couple of examples of some of the fences we use. We get pretty creative with fencing. We bought this system last year, and it's great. We can put about a quarter-mile fence out in like half an hour. So it's pretty fast. Here we're just fencing them out. There's some alfalfa in there, so I just keeping them out of there. But for interior fencing, it's super fast. And then this is just back to corn stalks. These are, I don't know, just like a month ago. And then this picture I just took, this is kind of the difference. If you look at where corn stalks are removed, you can see how bare this dirt is. So I mean, there's a tremendous, each one of those bales is probably 1,600 pounds. So you get a lot of residue removed when you are removing it. And you leave a pretty bare, you know, soil condition. And then this is just moving cows. We try to move across the road so we don't have to trailer when we can. You know, Boulder County's kind of busy, so. And then this is just an example, like we typically have to set up corrals. So this is just moving out. This was last Thursday. We were trying to move out before it thawed out and got muddy, and it was getting muddy like right as that picture was taken. We were hurrying, but you know, we have to always set up corrals. It's a lot of work to go into just fields with no infrastructure. So that's all I got. I'm happy to answer questions after.
Who owns the cows?
A few people do. So a lot of them are Vantines. A lot of them are Pancos. And then Pancos has a couple deals, so he grazes for a couple other people in Kansas. So we bring them in from wherever we can get the right numbers, basically. But getting the right numbers is really critical, because if you put in like 30 cows to 130 acres, it's just not really going to look like anything. And if you bring in too many, that's ideal, but then you have to get them out. And if you have too many cows and you're trying to own them all, it's always really hard to balance it out. So we need partners that can, you know, haul in 100 and then haul them out if we need to, and make sure we get the right number of animals to do the job.
Thank you, Jason.
All right, you're welcome.